All right, well, welcome to the Jesus Culture Leadership Podcast. My name is Mark, here with the one and only Cody Williams. We serve here at Jesus Culture Sacramento on our pastoral staff. I'm a connections pastor. Cody,
I'm the marketplace pastor.
The marketplace pastor. I don't know if there's a cooler title for a pastor than the marketplace pastor. When I heard that from stage, when I heard it was announced, I was like, I want your job. I was like, I want your job. So we'll be filling in today for Banning Leapshire, who you may know, you may have heard of. He's up and coming. And then Becky Johnson, and they're out today.
Do you want to be Banning and I'll be Becky?
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Yeah. I think that'll work.
I think I can do that.
Thank you for taking that one. I appreciate that. So, Cody, tell us a little bit about yourself. Marketplace pastor. So, now let me just say this. One of the things I actually love about Cody, in your family, really, you're one of our favorite families for my wife and I that we love dearly. Cody is got the most interesting family dynamic in this one sense. He's got 5 daughters. Mm-hmm. 5 daughters. Listen, and anytime I ever hear you, whether it's a podcast or someone talking with you, this comes up every time. And so, what is it like? I have 5. I mean, that's a lot of estrogen in the house. What is it like?
Well, it is. To say that it is absolutely the best part of my life is truly how my heart feels.
Totally.
But people are actually like it doesn't feel genuine. Like, oh, come on. Like,
yeah.
I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like, we're really close as a family. And for years, everybody just said, oh, just wait till they're teenagers and da-da-da. Well, now I've got a almost 17-year-old, 15-year-old, almost 14-year-old, almost 12-year-old, 11-year-old. And it just keeps getting better.
Yeah.
So, but the joke is that every time I come on stage at Jesus Culture, I'm going to mention I have 5 daughters and just hopes that somebody at some point feels called to lead to just, sponsor their weddings.
Exactly.
Or, pour into that cause, But so that's the joke is I'm always just ready to take an offering after I mention I have 5 daughters.
I think it was actually one of the first things that I thought of when I met you and heard that you had 5 daughters. And I immediately just thought about the weddings that you're going to have to sponsor. And so, Jehovah Jireh.
Jehovah Jireh. I like that word, sponsor.
Yeah,
anyway,
sponsor.
That's a good. That's the right word.
If people could just partner with you.
That's the right word. So, Mark, we gotta before we move any more into this podcast, we really have to address the fact that the Eagles are going to the Super Bowl.
They are going to the Super Bowl. Now, listen, no matter what you feel about the Eagles or Eagles fans,
is this your team? This is your team.
This is my team. It's basically my only team.
This isn't like a fair-weathered fan, like you just decided to now become an Eagles fan.
No,
tell us about your love for the Eagles.
Oh, man. Well, I don't think we're going to talk about leadership today then, but we're just going to go right to the Eagles. Listen, I'm just excited. And here's what I'm most excited for is our rematch against the Chiefs. I'm not going to complain about the last Super Bowl they were in together. That's all good. One of the worst holding calls I've ever seen in my life. We'll just leave it there. But I'm excited for this rematch. I think this is going to be an epic Super Bowl, at least for me.
So you're excited about it. A lot of people are upset about the Chiefs' last game and that they shouldn't be going to the Super Bowl. But you're actually excited about it for different reasons.
I'm excited about it because I want to see the Eagles stomp them. So if you're a Chiefs fan, I apologize, kind of. But it's going to be a beautiful Super Bowl.
How long have you been an Eagles fan?
My entire earliest memories. I mean, my grandfather was a massive Eagles fan. My dad, massive Eagles fan. So it's in the family line.
Wow.
I mean, it's just there's no option. I literally had no option to pick another team. It was like, you will be an Eagles fan.
So you had no choice, but you do love them. I will say I have to attest to your love for the Eagles because last Sunday while they were playing, I think we were getting ready to do a course or a class or a meeting together and you were trying so hard to be on track, but you were so distracted.
I was so distracted
by the score and just keeping up with it. See, I became an Eagles fan when Michael Vick.
Okay. Yes.
The first year when he came back.
Yeah.
He was my starting quarterback on my fantasy football team.
Okay.
And they had such a good team that couple years. I mean, not that they haven't over the years.
Yes.
But that guy would light up my scoreboard in fantasy football, and it was the funnest thing to watch. And I was like, I think I like the Eagles. So I guess I could say...
Are you an Eagles fan?
I guess I could say I'm an Eagles fan.
This podcast is going to go so well.
I mean, when was that? Michael Vick, was that like 2010,
Yeah, a few years
2009.
back.
Yeah.
He's the total package dude. That guy could
Yeah,
run, throw.
that era of Eagles was really fun to watch, and
So
I really
good.
enjoyed them. So
Well, I hope you're enjoying the games now.
I did grow up in the Northwest, though, so I have to give the Seahawks a shout out.
Yeah, okay. Well,
should
praise
we
God.
move on
Yeah,
now?
we should move on from that. Okay. Yes. So, well, hey, listen, going to the Super Bowl. I'm actually going to be in the UK during the Super Bowl. So for me, it will start at 11:30 at night. So it's okay, though.
Well, and you're going to have to figure out how to watch it.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm already talking to friends over there. We're trying to figure it out, but it's going to happen one way or the other. So
I
good.
love it.
Well, yeah. Well, it's good to have a fellow Eagles fan on the podcast. Then
I'm here for you, man. I'm here
I
for the
appreciate
support.
that. Yeah. So if you're listening, especially you church leaders, please be praying. Just be praying for God to move with grace and favor on the Eagles. It's their time. But yeah, Cody, thanks for being here today. We're so excited. We were chatting the other day, and we were talking around this idea of just attractive leadership, which is sometimes could be a funny term or way to say it, but I think we all know what's meant when we hear that, right? That there's just certain qualities that attract us to certain leaders in life. And the reality is that we've all probably connected to leaders in the past where we felt that, like, man, I want to follow their lead. They have such attractive qualities within their leadership that I want to emulate, be under, follow myself. But also we've been on the flip side where we've encountered leadership qualities that repelled or that kicked us away from it. And so as leaders, aspiring leaders, those listening today on the podcast, I think it's good that we, maybe just kind of bring people into that conversation. Is like, what are some of those qualities that make a leader attractive or make a leader worth following or, pull people into themselves? And so if you're listening right now, you might ask yourself the question, am I attractive?
Am I an attractive
leader?
I think one of the reasons this conversation is so exciting to have with you and so appropriate is of all my leader pastor friends, you demonstrate a heart to grow as a leader, be a better leader, study leaders, content, books, podcasts. Like, you're always trying to grow yourself in your own leadership. And I think that's probably one of the most attractive things about a leader is when somebody that wants to grow and just says, like, man, I want to be a better leader. I want to continue to grow. I want to continue to develop myself, because when you do that, you're that much more effective in the impact that you're going to have on people's lives. You demonstrate that so well.
So appreciate that.
I think one of the first things that stood out to me when we even started talking about this was attractive leaders have a heart to grow, and you really demonstrate that. I'm assuming that if I were to say, hey, like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you've developed so much more as a leader. What are those qualities or what are those things that you've grabbed a hold of as a leader?
I mean, that's a great question. I really appreciate that, by the way. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think
you're a really attractive leader, Mark.
All right, and thanks for joining us for the podcast today.
This is not awkward at all.
This is not awkward. No, that's okay. I would say, I had some really great leaders around me that I really just felt modeled this. I saw their hunger, their desire to grow, and really with a genuine heart to serve other people, and just realizing if we don't have a growth mindset, if we don't have just that aim to continue to grow and really be a steward of the talents that God's given us and to be faithful with what He's given us, then we're going to be quite limited in our impact for the kingdom. And so I think it was just being around some really quality leaders myself over the years when I came to Christ and really begin to sense that God was calling me to a place of leadership, which, to be honest, I kind of ran from for a bit. And so when I finally embraced, okay, I do feel like this is what God's calling me to, and with true humility and not false humility, to submit to that view and opinion of God, who's saying, okay, I'm calling you into this. How do we do this well? And so I think it's some of that. I probably just some of those modeling of that. But
as you've studied that, what are some of the qualities that stand out to you most?
I think servant leadership is probably was one of the first lessons, I think, especially coming into the Christian world, the church world.
Such a good one.
This was Christ, right? In Mark chapter 10, when he's talking to his disciples, and he says, if you're going to be a leader, it's going to be different among you. People in this world, they want to, leadership is about themselves. It's about what they can get, not what they can give. And Jesus said that's what's going to be different if you're going to be a kingdom leader and a kingdom-minded leader, is the posture of your heart has to be, leadership is about what I can give, not what I can get. And I think it's so clear. And I think one of my favorite passages around that was Paul writing to the Philippian church around humility. And he said, when you do things, don't let selfishness and pride be your guide. I think it's the New Century Version, which is kind of a unique one, but I love that language. Don't let selfishness and pride be your guide, but be humble in giving others honor even more than yourself. And I think that was one of the first things I saw modeled for me, was that servant leadership of, at the end of the day, leadership's about what we can give people, not what we can get out of it. And when I was studying that passage, it was talking about basically that word selfish it's really selfish ambition. And the actual translation is a mercenary spirit. And if you're listening, you know what a mercenary is. It's a hired gun. It's like you have a cause, a war, a battle, and you hire someone to come in and fight the cause. But at the end of the day, the mercenary isn't in it for the cause. They're in it for themselves. And so when Paul's writing to the church and he's calling people to a place of servanthood and servant leadership, he's saying, don't be the mercenary spirit. Don't be the person who's about the cause or just about the cause when there's something in it for you. Because at the end of the day, that's really what a mercenary spirit is. It's man, this thing's about me. I'll be the leader because I want to tell people what to do. I'll lead the Bible study because I want people to know how much I know.
Power, control, notoriety.
Yes, it's like at the end of the day, it's not about what you can give. It's actually about what you can get. And so Paul comes against that. Peter comes against that in 1 Peter 5. He says, if, as a fellow elder, care for the flock that God's entrusted to you. So if you're a church leader, this is the call. And he says, don't do it begrudgingly, and don't do it for what you can get out of it, but do it, to set a good example and to serve. He says, do it eagerly as one who wants to serve God and to serve others. And so I just think very, very early on, that was a big piece of it, was seeing that modeled. And basically just at the end of the day, I just don't want to follow people who are all about themselves.
So I would say anybody listening to this would not disagree with that. I think everybody listening to this would say, yeah, I servant leadership is attractive. Servant leadership is necessary. Servant leadership is right. But the truth is that there's a lot of leaders where that flesh part of us, that the human nature part of us comes in. How do you fight maintaining that? Because I don't think anyone's heart's to say, well, I don't want to be that way. But then life comes in, and your own flesh and your own pride and your own self-esteem and your own confidence and your own, I think that you are one of the best versions of a servant leader. Like you demonstrate that well. Like that's a quality that you've clearly put value on, because that's what you walk it out. But how do you kind of keep that fresh in your own leadership?
That's a great question. I think when it comes to servant leadership, it is a fight. You're always, the flesh, Bible's really clear that you're always going to struggle. All right, there's that tug of war back and forth, and I think you're going to be put in settings where you have authority and responsibility, and you are given platform, and God, you're going to be fruitful where you're faithful. So there is going to be more responsibility. Maybe you're known at some level, but I think it's just the heart posture, right? I think servant leadership doesn't mean you're unknown. It doesn't mean you don't have platform or influence. In fact, I think that's where the greatest influence comes from. So I honestly, at the end of the day, I do think it's a simple answer, but it is you do have to keep your eyes on the author and perfecter of your faith. Even Philippians 2 that I mentioned, Jesus said, or he said about Jesus, he said, be humble. He said, basically follow the example of Jesus, who released divine privileges from heaven to step into earth as a man, which is the ultimate condescension for God, to become man, and then to become a servant, and then to become a martyr for the sake of other people. So I do think at the end of the day, it's keeping your eyes fixed on the example of Christ and what he's done for us. And I think that's a lot of the, as a leader, it's a mandate. But also, I would just say it's much more fruitful to be a servant leader.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you may attract people because of your charisma and your gifts. A lot of times people are seen as a leader when they're the loudest and most dominant in the room, but not long term. And so that might work for a season, but when you get around people and people get around you, they'll sniff it out pretty quickly if you're about yourself or about others. And I think even if you're just saying, no, I want to be an effective leader for the long run, a leader worth following for the long run, then even just from a strategic standpoint, I need to be a servant leader because people will not ultimately follow or I think trust people who are not about others.
Yeah, that's so good. That reminds me of a time when I was in my late teens, maybe early 20s. I would travel with this ministry, this outreach ministry that would do evangelistic like plays, and they work with churches to come in and do all this outreach and evangelism. You'd blitz this whole city with invitations, and you get these people, and we would see hundreds and literally hundreds of people say it. I remember one town we were in, there was the population of the town was like 30,000, and I think we saw 7,000 people get saved in that window. And I would do these trips, and you come in and you're the leader. You come in and everyone gets to see instant fruit, and they get to see like momentum, and they get to see energy, and they get to see all these things. And so you'd kind of feel like a mini celebrity, you know, and you'd walk in and everybody'd want to talk to you and hang out with you and get to know you. And you're kind of like the star that's bringing all of this in.
You must be a great actor.
And yeah, right. It was one of those feelings where you just leave feeling like $1 million because you're just like, wow, I'm really cool. And I'll never forget, I got back from one of those trips, and it was we saw God do a whole bunch of things, and I was just feeling on top of the world. And one of my mentors, his name's Mark Estes, he saw me and he goes, "Hey," he goes, "feels pretty good when you're out on the road, huh?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Then you have to come home and be the real you, huh?" And I was like, yeah. And he just said, "Just remember why you're doing it."
Wow.
Just remember why you take the time and what God's doing, and just keep that perspective of, why do I even do this?
Yeah.
And it was one of those lessons for me as a late teen, early 20s, going like, oh.
Yeah.
Because I was feeling really good.
Yeah.
I really liked that attention. And you're right, I came back and nobody treated me like a celebrity. Everybody just treated me like the normal dude I was.
So healthy.
But it was one of those life lessons for me as a growing leader that was so significant for somebody to just kind of slap me upside the head a little bit and go, "Hey, remember why you're doing this."
Man, that's so good, and I think it's so key just having those mentors and leaders to create accountability, and I think just fresh perspective in our lives. And honestly, too, I think in line with this, something that you and I have talked about over the last couple of years is, and what I think that we connect on so much is that we are connectors. We do love to connect to people.
Yeah,
we're both pretty relational, highly relational. We're fueled by relationship, and I think there is something to be said about a relational leader. Some are extrovert, some introvert. It's not always just wiring, but just that at the end of the day, you are about people. And, we've even talked about the difference, and I think you do this so well. I think I've said this to you before, but there's a difference between a connector and a networker. And I think sometimes that networker vibe, and if you're listening, you just, depending on, it doesn't matter if you're in business or a church or just your own family, like, when someone's trying to network you.
Yep.
And
100%.
But you actually have some really great context on that, and I think the way that you think about the networking versus being a connector, just as a leader, I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Well, and in some ways, it comes back to that servant leadership piece of what you can do for me versus what can I do for you. In this day and age, everyone, like, you can smell a networker.
Absolutely.
A mile away.
Yeah.
Versus somebody who just genuinely has a heart to go, how can I help you? How can I connect with you? In the context of like marketplace, I think it's something I deal with all the time. Just meeting with different business people, even within the context of our church.
Yeah.
Real estate agents are probably the worst at this because there's always that tension of, how do I grow my business when your business is really built on people? And obviously I'm in real estate a little bit, and so I've run from that the opposite way, because it's and the difference is simply this: when it's all about you and what somebody can do for you, everything becomes transactional. So you're not networking to connect. You're networking for the hopes of a transaction, and it just becomes so disingenuous.
Oh, people become a commodity.
Yeah, and nobody wants to feel that way. I had recently, I ran into somebody, and I was introducing them to some friends, and they're in real estate. They don't even live in this area, and they're like, "Well, yeah, if you like in the introduction, it's like, well, yeah, if you know anybody in the area my area looking for real estate, let me know." And it was like,
exactly,
like, is this relevant to this conversation right now? I think there's something that's being flipped upside down right now. Across the board, not just in the church leadership, but also in the marketplace.
Yeah.
And there's an understanding that these things aren't just tactics to get somewhere transactionally. This is a heart that you want to carry in everything that you do.
So good.
This is a Christ-like nature that just says, I just want to help people.
Yeah.
I just want to bring value wherever I can. And I genuinely want to care. And I think caring is so important these days. Like when you wake up, you should be doing something that you really care about, that you care about helping people, that you care, whatever that thing is that you're doing.
That's right.
I think that there's a shift that's happening, but so often out of our own insecurities, we revert. So we're like, yeah, I just want to be the connector, but then we revert to the networker because we're like, it's I want to see this be successful, or I want to see this, and it never really works.
Yeah. Well, I think too, it reminds me of even biblically, it just talks about don't let pride kind of lead you as well. And I think when you've got to get honest with yourself. If you find yourself just trying to use people as a commodity, if you find yourself just trying to network for your own good all the time, and it's not that you don't look for win-wins, that's great.
Yeah,
you can
win-wins are great.
That's great. I think
you should value your time. You should value what you're like. I don't have a problem with any of that.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not like but I do think that word pride, it means empty glory. And it's like what he was actually commanding us is let's not be a people who build platforms just for the sake of like our own leadership and just trying to be somebody or pursue that. And he's like, don't allow that to guide you at the end of the day. Like this thing is about myself. And I don't know. I know for me, I have to do that internal audit quite often. Or I have leaders who like Mark did for you, where he just says, hey, like I'm kind of sensing something coming off of you here.
Yeah.
And can we talk about that? And I just think if you don't have that, I think in your life as a leader, that's a dangerous place to be. If you don't have somebody who can genuinely speak into your life on some of those things that you trust. And so, man, that's so good. Great perspective on that. And
that relational over transactional. And I will say, I mean, it falls in line with people over program. We want to be more people-minded than we are program-minded. And I think in the church that can be really difficult when you're trying to lead like a service or lead a move of God, lead a moment where you challenge with that tension of where do I take this right now?
That's good.
I think when you keep it on people over program, I think you're always going to win. Like there's never a lose in that situation, in my opinion.
That's right. I think that's the reputation you want too. Even just talking about how a servant leader mindset, I really do think contributes to being a trustworthy leader at the end of the day. Like when you're about people, I wouldn't say they're synonymous, but they're definitely related. Is a servant leader, even just at the foundation, I think is what leads you to be a trustworthy leader. I heard some stats recently from my friend Yvonne. We were talking. He coaches leaders, and he was sharing some stats with me. He said that 3 out of 4 people would take a pay cut to follow a leader that they trust.
Wow.
And that the same study showed that only 51% of people trust their leader and their integrity and their faithfulness and where they're going, their accountability and decision making, transparency, just all of it. And that was eye-opening for me. I was like,
that's huge.
At the end of the day, like trust is the conduit for influence. It's the currency that we have. It's the glue that holds a team together. And I think that's actually massively attractive when it comes to leadership. Study after study shows that. I mean, that people are looking for integrity and faithfulness and character from the people that they're being led by.
Wow.
And I think that's a great internal audit again for me, as I'm going, okay, am I a trustworthy person? Am I do I own my mistakes? Am I honest? Am I authentic? Am I just trying to build my own platform for people to kind of serve me, or am I trying to create space for other people to flourish and thrive? I just think that's absolutely essential as we're talking about the type of leaders that we're called to be.
Yeah.
And I would even just add this, and I'd love to hear your thoughts as well, but is that when it comes to being trustworthy, I just don't, I think if you have the reputation of being untrustworthy, you have a really difficult time recruiting and maintaining talent. High level leaders, high capacity people, if they don't trust you, they just don't stick around long.
Yeah. Well, it creates a revolving door. And your giftings or your charisma or a certain talent that you have will carry you really far. But when you look back at somebody and there's just a trail of people,
right,
and there's just this carnage of people, and then there's all of these new constant leaders coming in, I think you should stop and go, how am I doing as a leader?
What's the common denominator here?
Yeah. And I so I learned this in the hard way. I mean, the marketplace, I had some business partners in the early days of my adult life doing business. And I realized really quickly there wasn't a trustworthiness there. But I didn't get to see that because I was so enamored by the gifting and in the areas that they would shine. And at the end of the day, it's never worth it.
Yeah.
It's never worth it. You don't want to be surrounded by untrustworthy leaders. It's just, did I say that right? Untrustworthy leaders. Anyway.
Yeah. I think is that proper grammar? I led with it, so we'll see. Could edit that out. Yeah.
That is so important for us leaders to take assessment of our own leadership and go, who do I have with me? And I know that people move on. God calls people to different areas. I'm not saying transition never happens.
Right.
That's a part of
in fact,
life.
I think it should happen.
Yeah, it should happen. But I think when you have a constant revolving door, you need to step back and go, I need to get some people around me, and I need to get some feedback and some growth points and some accountability. And there's some things I need to change because even they want to be good leaders.
Yeah.
Nobody wakes up and goes, how do I be a terrible leader today?
Right.
People want to be a great leader. Oftentimes, we just don't have the right parameters around our lives to help us be that.
It's so good.
And sometimes that's just accountability and the right people having our backs. I think that's one thing I appreciate about our friendship is we can just have those conversations and challenge each other in certain ways. And I think that's so needed in leadership today.
Man, that's so good. Whether it's servant leadership, trustworthy leadership, we were talking before this. I was like, we could probably talk about 100 different qualities.
Right.
Courageous leadership, multiplying leadership, visionary leadership. There's so many different areas as a leader that you can grow, whether it be in the marketplace, in the church, or your own family, building culture where you are. It's a journey worth going on, and I think it's a conversation worth having and challenging yourself with. Am I an attractive leader, and in the right sense, But so good. And I'd love to just maybe end with this. You talked about earlier, just what does it look like to be an all-in leader? And as soon as you said that, man, it just resonated with me. Is even for me, I want to follow the leaders where I see just an all-in mentality. And I think it actually goes with some of this. And so I'd love, as we just wrap up today, like just your heart around what does it look like to be an all-in leader?
I mean, at the core of trustworthy, servanthood, caring, relational, all of those aspects, visionary, when you are an all-in leader, all of those things are healthier. And they're healthier because you have a clear vision. And you have a clear objective of like, what do you feel called to do? Like, what has God put on my life? What am I called to do? And how am I called to do that? I don't know that people would know how to articulate it, but I think an all-in leader, I don't know that they would know to articulate it that way, but I think an all-in leader is probably the most attractive leader around. When you see an all-in leader, they're magnetic, and they all the rest of these things fall into line. I think of leaders like Craig Rochelle, I happen to know somebody that was close to him on staff for years. And when they, we see him, you and I see him, in his podcast and his preaching and his leadership and his books and, phenomenal leader, right?
Yeah.
But to have somebody close to him not only affirm all of the things that you hear him say and you see, but when he gave me just specifics around just the intentionality that man has taken in his life to live his life with integrity, honor, trustworthy, servanthood. He doesn't just talk about it. He actually has taken measures in his life, put people around him so that when he goes all in, he's safeguarding.
That's right. Yeah.
Every aspect of his life and his family and the ministry and the church. And I think oftentimes we don't do that enough, really. I think we need to see that more and more in the church as well as in the marketplace.
Yeah.
You only set yourself up for success when you get that intentional.
I love that. There's like a healthy way to do it. I think, we've seen people go all in. And sometimes it can conjure up images of people who go all in for the sake of leadership, but they, their family is basically just on the altar of the business they're building or the church they're leading or whatever it may be, or they're all in on what they're called to do with a passion. But in other areas, things are just a mess and sloppy and awry. It's so I love what you're saying. Just that there's ways to safeguard, to be a leader worth following for the long run, and to have an all-in mentality. It really does touch all areas and not just the thing you're doing at the end of the day. I just think it's so special. Man, this is so good.
Yeah.
We could just sit here and talk forever on this.
We could. This is a fun topic and conversation, and I think it's relevant to so many people's lives.
Yeah.
But you've got to take the steps needed to accomplish the things that you want to do.
It's so good.
You've got to put the safeguards and the accountability, and I just can't stress that enough.
Yeah.
Well,
come on. This is it. Well, man, maybe we should take over the podcast again sometime.
I tried to put my Becky hat on as best as I could today.
Yeah.
I don't know if I accomplished that at all.
We'll let her be the judge of it.
I feel like she probably would have quoted more books, and she probably would have gave better examples about her family. She's such a great mom on top of being a great pastor.
You're such an encourager, Cody.
She has great fashion right now. She drinks good coffee. Yeah.
And Banning's pretty decent too.
Yeah, Banning's pretty great too.
Yeah, he's pretty great too.
Yeah, of course.
We'll jump on
I
here
love
again.
both of them. They're such an amazing, they're just such amazing leaders.
I love it. Speaking of attractive leaders, I guess that's the challenge for us today is, are we being attractive when it comes to the leadership qualities that we're embracing, how we're growing, and what direction we're moving? Thanks for being with us today, the Jesus Culture Leadership Podcast. Make sure you join us next week, and fly, Eagles, fly.
All right, Eagles on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Eagles.
Eagles.